started. All right. And then in terms of timing, just to give you a sense for how long the session will be tonight, it'll be about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. I plan to talk maybe 30 to 45 minutes, and then there will be some time for question and answer as well. And then if you could be so kind as to make sure you keep your videos off and your sound muted, that will just kind of help with the bandwidth. I'm actually going to be turning my video off here shortly as well as I go through the presentation, just to make sure that everyone can see the slides okay. As I mentioned, there will be a question and answer session or a section at the end, but don't feel like if you've got some questions or you have something that pops in your mind, don't feel like you have to save it till the end in terms of remembering it. Go ahead and throw it in the chat. I've got a couple of folks that are going to be moderating the chat for me. So April and LaWanda will be the chat monitors. So they will kind of call the chat when we get to that section and ask those questions. If you have any logistic questions or anything that you wanted to ask during the session, you can also send them a private message and they'll do their best to accommodate you then as well. So that is about it. Let's get into it. So first, just want to take a few minutes to introduce myself. My name is Sabrina Joy. I am based out of the Dallas, Texas area. I spent many, many years in the airline industry. It's about 16, 17 years in the airline industry between working for American Airlines and then Viasat. Then transitioned into the nonprofit space supporting the breast cancer community. I then started my coaching business, Tending Habits. So I'm a habit coach. And people often, when I tell them that, they ask, oh, what is a habit coach? You know, how did you get into that? You know, where did your interest in habit come from? And it's kind of a windy story there. There's a few different things that I think have come together into what I consider to be really my life's work. I did grow up in the era of the Oprah Winfrey Show. So definitely was a daily habit growing up after school, before dinner, watching that show. Of course, my mother taped it in the afternoon. We'd watch it together. And interestingly enough, as I look back on it, it was often the shows that Oprah had where she had an expert on or someone talking about ways to live your best life. Of course, I liked the shows where there was a celebrity or an artist or somebody performing. But when I look back on it, the shows that really resonated the most and the ones that really stick out are the ones that really gave me information on how I could go about improving myself. You know, some of the rules of the road, as you would say, in terms of living your best life, that really resonated with me, you know, even at a very young age. And then, of course, as a kid in school, I was certainly one of those students that when someone was going to be visiting the school to talk to us, bringing in some sort of motivational speaker, I loved those days. I didn't find them boring in the least. I was always fascinated and mesmerized by how these people would come in and kind of command the room or command the auditorium. And I loved hearing about the lessons that they had picked up along the way in life. Some of those things I filed away to be able to use, you know, right then and there as a student, as a young person. Some of the things, you know, I knew wouldn't be relevant until I became an adult, but they were still things that I really enjoyed listening to. And then, of course, I was an athlete growing up in middle school and high school. I played basketball and ran track, and then ran track in college at Florida A&M University. And I mentioned that because, you know, when you consider Oprah Winfrey Show, you know, being interested in and enjoying hearing people speak about lessons learned, and then being an athlete in that daily grind, those daily practices, getting ready for a race day or a tournament. The through line through all of those things includes self-improvement, you know, daily practice or habit, and motivational speaking. So all of those things have really converged into what I do now. I'd have to say my why is the fact that I really and truly love to see other people win. It's something that I get great satisfaction out of. It's funny because I will say when I was younger, when I was a kid, I definitely was one of those athletes that felt like, you know, cheerleading isn't for me. I'm an athlete. I'm someone that's on the field, in the arena, doing the thing, not cheering those that are doing the thing on. And honestly, as an adult, when I consider what I'm most passionate about, it truly is cheering people on in life. I love to see people achieve goals, or to, have an aha moment after a conversation with me. And so it's funny that now, being a cheerleader of sort, or that gift of encouragement, is something that I truly embody and enjoy. And I will say, in case there is anyone, any former cheerleaders on the call today, I did learn to appreciate that cheerleading is in fact a sport, and they are athletes as well. So certainly no shade or disrespect there. But enough about me. What I really want to do tonight is really provide you with the three really important steps to leveraging the power of habit to set yourself up for success and achieve your life's goals. And that first step is really understanding and appreciating the power of habit, and how it really influences and impacts every aspect of our life. This is one of my favorite habit quotes. It's by Charles Duhigg, who wrote The Power of Habit. And it says, anything that you want to accomplish in life is possible so long as you have the right habits in place. And that anything, one of the things I always like to point out and make people aware of and remember, is that anything truly is anything. It's not just the big things. Taking the time to assess your habits, see whether or not they're working for you, is not just for the people that are trying to start the next Amazon or write the next bestseller. It's for the people that are just trying to show up well in their life, trying to do a good job at work, trying to be the type of parent that they want to be. And I would argue that those little things, what we consider little things, just making it from week to week, getting to the end of the week feeling like you showed up the way you wanted to, is really the big things. That really is what life is about. Research indicates that almost half of what we do on any given day, we do every day. I'm going to say that one more time just to make sure you caught that. Almost half of what we do on any given day, we do every day. So when you think about all of your waking hours, all of the actions, all of the thoughts, all of the emotions, the self-talk, about half roughly of that you do every single day. And when you consider that percentage, you begin to understand that your habits really become the underpinning of your life. It really becomes your quality of life. I like to say the quality of your habits really do determine the quality of your life. And I think when you change your habits, you also change your life. So again, there really is no area in your life that can't be improved through habit, not one single one, in my opinion. So step one is appreciating and recognizing the power of habit. The second thing is really understanding how habits work. It's not a complicated thing. So while habits, I think, are very powerful, at their core, they are fairly simple in terms of how they work. The habit loop is something that all habits kind of act like. The habit loop is involved in a part of every single habit. And these three components are a part of every single habit. So the first component is the cue. It's the trigger. It's the thing that kind of sets off the habit. The most common cues are time and location, but there are certainly more cues than that. Time and location are the most common. You then have the routine, or the habit itself. This could be actions, but it could also be your thoughts and your emotions. And I always like pointing that out, because I think often we think of habits as just things that we do. But our thoughts and our self-talk, those are also habits. And when you consider that what's going on in your head often drives your emotions, it can drive your performance a lot of times, then you realize that you've got to pay attention to that as well. The last component is the payoff or the reward. And there is always a payoff. There's always a reward, even for the quote unquote bad habits, right? So again, these components, this habit loop is at play for every single habit. Let's talk about craving for a little bit. Craving is really what powers this habit loop. When a habit begins to get really, really ingrained, there's craving comes into play. And craving will create a scenario where you begin to think and anticipate the payoff before the cue even shows up. And the reason why that's important is because once that's there, that becomes the challenging part of breaking a habit when that craving is there. I'll give you a little bit of an example of that from my life. So I'm a big bubble tea person. I like bubble tea. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's this Asian drink. It's a tea or milk tea. Sometimes they're slushies, and then they've got little tapioca pearls in it. People generally really like it, or they're kind of like, what is this stuff? I'm one of those folks that like it. I had a job that was in a location that on my commute home, I had to pass by or near. It wasn't that much going out of my way to make a stop at my favorite bubble tea place. And when I first started working from this location, I might stop at Fat Straws is the name of the shop. I might stop once a week. And then, before I knew it, it would turn into maybe 2 or 3 times a week. When I knew it was a problem, and I say a problem because, these are empty calories I'm taking in. These are, $4 or $5 a pop every time I buy them. When I knew it was something like, oh, I better pay more attention to this, was when I began to think about that payoff, that feeling, really kind of the chewing sensation and that relaxation and that bit of sweetness, to kind of take the edge off from the day. I would start thinking about that before the cue, which the cue was really time, after work, location, on the tollway. But I'd start thinking about this, after work bubble tea in the morning. I might think about it the day before, depending on, okay, I know tomorrow I'm going to have a little bit of time. I'm going to be able to leave work early. And before I need to, get my son to practice, I'll have enough time to stop at Fat Straws. So once I noticed that craving and knowing how habits work, I knew, what, this habit probably isn't going to serve me doing this every day. So I better pivot it and make an adjustment. The golden rule of habit is that any habit can be changed if the cue and the payoff remain the same. And so, of course, I've got another example for this, which may or may not be a personal example. It's an example nonetheless, though. Let's say evening glass of wine, right? For those wine drinkers out there, often there's this thing called the evening glass of wine when you're ready to relax for the evening. And there sometimes, where you might enjoy that evening glass of wine, once or twice a week, or maybe, towards the end of the week as end of a hard week comes. And then sometimes you go through a season where maybe, you're starting to have that evening glass of wine earlier in the week and you want to make a change. Well, the cue often for that evening glass of wine is time, evening, and location, sitting in your living room. The payoff after you pour that glass of wine and start to drink it is relaxation. Well, really, what you can insert there in the routine is making a cup of tea, pouring kombucha into a wine glass. Those things, when you replace the routine, but you keep the cue and the payoff, you've got a better chance of that new habit, that new routine sticking, because you really haven't messed with the cue, which is always going to be there, and you haven't messed with the payoff, which is truly what you're craving. So that's kind of how that works. The science of habit. So what's interesting and what I find fascinating, of course, as we all know, the brain is a phenomenal organ, right? It's just amazing. What I find fascinating about habits in the brain is that habits were always intended to serve us. the brain evolved to be able to chunk together like tasks so that it could conserve its own brain power for higher level thinking. Think of how it would be. Imagine what it would be like if when you woke up in the morning, you had to make a conscious decision, conscious thought to get out of bed, use the restroom, brush your teeth, wash your face, put on your makeup, brush your hair, clothes. If each of those things was something you had to consciously consider and consciously tell yourself you needed to do. Can you imagine how worn out you'd be by the time it was time to, pull the car out of the garage? So what the brain has done over time is developed a way to chunk those actions together so that you can, those things can kind of happen automatically. So I personally find that fascinating. I've got a couple of folks in the waiting room, guys, so I'm gonna go ahead and let them in. Great. So again, I think that's fascinating, and it's something that we could consider. And this is really when you talk about having habits work for you, and the fact that once habits are ingrained, they really are unconscious, and so you're not having to put forth the effort to do the things, but they are so powerful in helping you move towards reaching your goals. Another thing to keep in mind, though, is that the brain does not discern between a good versus bad habit. And this is why we have to be intentional about tending to our habits, in ensuring and assessing whether or not the habits that we have in place are serving us or not. So that is something that we want to keep ourselves aware of as well. So step one was understanding and appreciating the power of habit. Step two was understanding how habits work, because it's hard to kind of make habits work for yourself and leverage them to your advantage when you're not quite sure, don't have a good understanding and working knowledge of how they work. Step three, or knowing yourself. I can't stress the importance of this enough. And there's a couple of reasons why. One is when you understand yourself and how you're naturally wired, in a lot of ways, you're able to take yourself off the hook, right? In terms of being able to release yourself from comparing to other people, or why is this person able to do this or achieve this goal and go about things this way, and it seems, easy, and I'm struggling. The second thing is because it allows you to better be able to employ the right strategies that are really going to work with your natural tendencies versus against them. So let's get into this a little bit more. The 4 tendencies. So the 4 tendencies, this is a framework that Gretchen Rubin created, and it really summarizes the ways that people tend to deal with expectation. And people typically fall into one of these 4 tendencies. Gretchen Rubin is the author of The Happiness Project, which is a pretty popular book, a bestseller, as well as Better Than Before. So let's just walk through these a little bit. An upholder is someone who easily meets outer and inner expectations. So this is your friend or your colleague that seems to handle all of their work responsibilities well, and achieves all of their annual and quarterly goals. And then they also seem to, when they decide to do something for themselves personally or establish a personal goal, they seem to find a way to meet that as well without too much trouble. An obliger easily meets outer expectations, but struggles to meet inner expectations. So these are the people, and this is the most common tendency, these are the people that at work, if someone gives them a task, or if someone says, hey, could you do this for me, even in a personal relationship, they really don't have any trouble with that. You know, they meet those expectations, they're on time, the work is done. But if they establish a goal for themselves that only they really know about, they sometimes struggle to meet those expectations. A questioner is kind of self-explanatory, right? Can only meet inner or outer expectations once they're convinced that they make sense. So they'll question and like, you know, is this something that I really need to do or need to pay attention to? And once they have satisfied their own questions about whether or not there's validity in the expectation, then they don't struggle too much with meeting those expectations. And then our rebels struggle to meet both inner and outer expectations. They just don't like to be put upon. Whether it's from someone else or themselves, they will kind of naturally go against that. A quick example of how this kind of comes into play in terms of being aware of this and what you can do to meet this need. I'll take obliger, since that's one that I know well, and I've got a personal example for that. So for me, because I'm an obliger, I sometimes struggle with inner expectations. I really need those outer expectations really kind of help drive me to make sure I'm doing what I need to do. It's not a necessity. It's not that I have to have them in place, but I'm more easily able to meet expectations when there's some outward accountability. So for me, sometimes that means if I have a goal or if I set out to do something, I can be pretty public about it. I'll share it with a friend. I'll put it on, you know, it could be something as simple as putting it on social media. Hey, I'm going to run a marathon in 3 months. Yay me. And putting that out there. Now, mind you, everybody's living their own lives. No one's thinking about, oh yeah, Sabrina said she's going to run this marathon. I wonder if she's been training. No one's thinking that. But because for me, there's that outer expectation, and there's this thought that maybe somebody is, you know, relying on me to do this, is sometimes the little bit of extra that I need to put those running shoes on and get those miles in. So that's a little bit how that works, can be very helpful. The next framework that I wanted to go over, and honestly, Enneagram, if you're familiar with that, is certainly something that, you know, I could spend a whole masterclass talking about on its own. The Enneagram system is another helpful tool. Definitely recommend it. It describes patterns in how people interpret the world and manage their emotions. And what I really like about it is that it's very detailed. It's a detailed system, but also nuanced. So between kind of your Enneagram type and what wing you are and different numbers that kind of relate to your type, it really gives you a lot of color, a lot of detail around the things that are kind of natural strengths for you and natural weaknesses to consider as well. And again, I like bringing personal examples into this just to kind of illustrate how this comes together in terms of leveraging it as you're dealing with your habit planning. I am a type 6. I am a true type 6, which is often called a loyalist. But one of the characteristics of a type 6 is that we will, in our minds, go through every single negative scenario or bad scenario that might come our way. And we'll spend a lot of time coming up with plans to mitigate those possible negative situations. And sometimes that is very helpful. In other times, it can prohibit us from taking action. And there are times when you just need to take action. You can't sit around and be thinking about every single scenario that could go wrong. Otherwise, you'd never get anything done. But knowing that about myself, knowing that I am wired to kind of default to that, gives me the vocabulary and the knowledge that it exists so that I'm able to identify it when it happens. Once I'm able to identify it, then I can pivot. Then I can say, Sabrina, stop planning for the apocalypse. This is just, this is just a masterclass that you're giving tonight, right? To, take the next step. So that, that at a high level is how that works. But again, it's really, really important because it helps you look at the strategies and employ the strategies that are best going to work for you. And it kind of releases you from wondering and thinking about how someone else down the street is able to do it differently, why it comes different to them. So definitely feel like it's worth taking the time to do some of these assessments and really just take inventory of yourself. So the 4 tendencies in the Enneagram are, are true kind of personality types and systems, definitely worth going through. But another thing to consider are really just personality traits, right? Different things about how you're wired that you could consider as well. Those could be things like whether or not you're a what they call sprinter or a marathoner. And the difference there is, a marathoner, someone that's got like that personality, they really don't mind the grind over the long term for a long-term goal. Like if they're writing a book, they like the process of writing that book day to day, and they really are motivated by what's going to happen at the end of the year when that book is finished. Or in the case of an actual marathoner, they're motivated by race day, and that gets them through week to week. Whereas a sprinter type personality is more short bursts. They need quick results, and they need to be shooting for something that's a little bit closer in. Now, both of these personality types can train for a marathon, right? The sprinter, though, may need to break that training plan, that might be 3 months, into shorter buckets. So they're just thinking about their long run that they're doing on Saturday, and that's something that they can tick off. They're not thinking about the marathon at the end of the 12 weeks, because if they focus there, they'll lose momentum and lose interest. Abstainers and moderators, this is the one that I really like talking about, because this was kind of a game changer for me when I realized where I sat on this. An abstainer is someone that, for things that are tempting to them, they have to, it's all or nothing. There's not kind of this idea of, unlike a moderator can do a little bit of each time. So these people that are, eat well, they're healthy, but they allow themselves a little treat, a little bit of dark chocolate every night, just a little square, and that satisfies their sweet tooth, and they stick to their plan. And then you have other people like me, and it's either I'm going to have no cake or I'm going to have the entire cake. There's not a lot of in between for me. So what does that tell me about myself? I don't need to be like Christina, who can have a little bit of chocolate. That doesn't work for me. I have to not have the chocolate, not have the cake, not have whatever the thing is available to me, if that's what's what's going to get me to my goal. Doesn't make me any better or worse than anybody else. It's just how I'm wired. And instead of trying to force myself to be a moderator in certain situations when I know that that's not my natural tendency, I release myself from it. Same thing with kind of collectors or people that like scarcity. Sometimes for collectors, as an example, when they're endeavoring on a new goal or a new project, the first thing that they want to do is collect all the things, right? They want all the pens and the journals and the, or if you're a project manager, you really get excited about getting that project plan first pulled together, getting all the different departments in and understanding what all the different tasks are. And, that is your jam. But then it kind of, your motivation stops once it's all in the spreadsheet, right? Because what got you motivated was the collecting of all the information, not necessarily the steady week-to-week progress that needs to be made. So what do you do to kind of make sure you're getting a little bit of that feeling of, okay, I'm collecting things, but meeting the end goal as well? Let me just check my waiting room and see if anyone's trying to join us. I think we're good. So I've gone over the 3 steps: appreciating the power of habit, understanding how habits work, and knowing yourself. Wanted to give you just a little bit of a flavor for habit strategies, because remember I talked about, you're really going through those steps, and certainly the step of knowing yourself so that you can employ the right strategies. So we'll call this a little bit of bonus information going into some of these. These are just some 3 of the common habit strategies, but the list is kind of endless in terms of different strategies and different things that you can, again, piece together to put together a plan for yourself. So a keystone habit is a very, very powerful strategy. And what a keystone habit is it's a habit whereby conquering that habit, it propels you, it's like a domino effect to other habits, right? And often that keystone habit isn't necessarily the obvious thing that you would attach to whatever goal you have in mind. An example that I like to use here is when you have a goal of losing weight, right? A lot of people, kind of have that goal, especially this year after quarantine and Thanksgiving now. And you might say, okay, my goal is to lose a certain number of pounds over time. And most people focus on, okay, what am I eating? How often am I working out? Those kinds of things. Often what you can do if you really, really peel things back is you really can start with drinking 20 ounces of water first thing in the morning. That very well could be your keystone habit. That small win, that thing that you did that is good for your health and wellness, can propel you to all the other things over time. So discovering what that, it's not prescriptive. It's not drinking the water is the keystone habit if you want to lose weight. All of this kind of depends on you and depends on, your lifestyle and your wiring and all of that. But when you're able to find that keystone habit, that can really be an impactful strategy to employ to get all of your habits working in order for you. Habit stacking is another one. It's another strategy that I love. And habit stacking is taking a set of habits that are already ingrained and inserting the new habit into that routine. And I'll give you an example there. I used to really, really struggle with consistently taking my daily vitamins for whatever reason. I would take it for a week, take them for a week. I'd have them on the kitchen counter. I'd have them, all of these different things to try to remember. It wasn't until I inserted that daily habit into my morning routine of getting up, using the bathroom, drinking water, which was part of my routine. I put my daily vitamin, inserted that in there. So it took no time at all to make that. I haven't missed a daily vitamin since, and that's been maybe 6 months at this point. And the only change was inserting it into a morning routine that was already established and working well for me. Clean slate is a strategy that really involves, your clean slate could be the beginning of the month, it could be the beginning of the week, it could be New Year's. I want to say this now because I feel like that there are some folks in New Year's is coming. You've got folks that I'll call them New Year's resolution haters. They kind of talk about people that establish New Year's resolutions. And yes, we know all of the stats about how often people stick to those New Year's resolutions. That's a different issue. For some people, that clean slate, that start to the new year, to the new month, to the new week, to the new day, for some people can really be a great motivator to get you started. Again, the strategy doesn't exist on its own. It's not going to, gonna be, the silver bullet to kind of get you where you need to be, but it could be a very powerful part of your suite of strategies that you use to develop your plan. Awesome. So where do we go from here? Where do you go from here? I've given you hopefully what you feel like is meaty information and intrigued, and you feel like you got a lot out of today. But honestly, it truly is the iceberg. There's a lot of detail that we can go into really each of those components, and certainly there's value to actually doing the work, the self-assessment work, really understanding all of the strategies at play and putting together the plan, and then someone to kind of coach you and help you execute that plan. I've developed a curriculum that will help you do all of this, will help you develop your own plan, give you the tools to make the plan, the path forward to execute it, and the encouragement on the way. This is a curriculum that is managed over a 3-month course. It launches on January 5th, and it goes until March 30th. It includes 7 live virtual coaching sessions where we will again go deeper into all of the things that I talked about today, and then individualized coaching as well, and really kind of get you on your way to executing your plan. So creating the plan and executing it. For joining me today, I mentioned there'd be a little bit of something for those that joined today. I'm going live with registration on Sunday, but for you all, you will have the opportunity to kind of reserve your spot before it goes public. I'm keeping this course really small because I really do enjoy and really want to be able to provide a lot of personal coaching and one-on-one information. And obviously, I'm only one person. So there are only 30 spots available for this course. So letting you guys have first dibs on those, and then it will open up to the public. So wanted to let you know that as well. I'm actually going to stop sharing and come off camera. And before we get into the questions, and I feel like my moderators were texting me through the session, so we may have had trouble with people getting in the chat, but certainly now that I'm not sharing screen, folks can come off camera or not, or just come off of mute and ask questions. But before I do that, I think I've got some time. I really wanted to read to you guys this quote that I came across a couple of months ago, and it really resonated with me. And it talked about, it inspired me in terms of, really what it takes to leverage your time and why you should take the time to do the things that you need to do to reach the goals that you have for yourself, that you're capable of reaching. So bear with me here. This quote is by Derek Sivers. When you experience someone else's genius work, a little part of you feels, that's what I could have, would have, and should have done. Someone else did it, and you didn't. They fought the resistance, you gave in to distractions. They made it top priority, you said you'd get to it someday. They took the time, you meant to. When this happens, you can take it 2 ways. You could let that part of you give up. Oh, well, now I don't need to make that anymore. Or you could do something about that jealous pain. Shut off your phone, kill the distractions, make it top priority, and spend the time. It takes many hours to make what you want to make. The hours don't suddenly appear. You have to steal them from comfort. Whatever you were doing before was comfortable, this is not. This will be really uncomfortable. The few times in my life I've made a real change like this, it felt awful on the surface. I wasn't shallow happy about it. I wasn't smiling. I was annoyed and fighting it inside. But on the outside, I did the work, and in the end, got the deeper satisfaction of finishing. I know for sure that there are things that you want to do that you haven't finished yet, or that you haven't accomplished yet. And I know for some of us, the reason why we haven't done that is because we've been comfortable. We've been a little bit distracted. We've gotten a little bit comfortable, and we like that. Self-assessment, understanding, how you're wired and the weaknesses around that can be uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable. But if you want to achieve the things that you know in your heart you desire, you're going to have to get uncomfortable. You're going to have to steal those hours from comfort. And I'd love to help you do that. All right.
Sabrina, we do have a question from Anne-Marie. Hi, Anne-Marie Mingo.
Hi, Anne-Marie.
He'd like to know, what was the third personality trait within the sprinter, marathoner, and abstainer moderator frameworks? Can you go back to that, please?
Yeah, so that third one was the collector or scarcity. So some people, so I laugh because I get made fun of a lot, those that are friends with me on social media, because I have a pen issue. I have a lot of pens, and I like journals too. And I certainly have gone through, I can remember kind of having this bright idea about, things I wanted to write, things I wanted to do. And I'd get very excited about getting the journal to do this writing and the pens to do that writing. And, that became the thing, right? But I didn't have some of those other strategies to actually get past the collecting of the things, to start working on that goal.
Thank you. Of course, I'm over here taking notes. So
Awesome. Awesome. Any other questions? Let's see. Awesome, awesome.
Who was the author of that poem again? That one that you closed with? That was so powerful.
Isn't it good? Derek Sivers. It's either Sivers or Sivers, S-I-V-E-R-S.
Thank you.
So I see a question Angelia asked about, what does a first session with me look like? So in an individual session, coaching session, I really start that with, it's really exploratory to understand what your goals are, what you're working towards, how you kind of assess yourself in terms of, the things that you think might be holding you back. It's really, it's really something where you would actually be doing a lot of the talking, giving me some information about where you're struggling, allowing me to better understand you, and then me sharing, okay, well, here's my approach, kind of here's my process, and here's my steps, what that would mean. And then we decide if that sounds good, and we start working the plan. It's always highly individualized. I mean, there's steps, that I take, but in order for the strategy or the plan to work for you, it's got to work for you and just you. And we're all a little bit different. We all have different nuances, not only kind of innately in our personalities, but also where we are in life, what our circumstances are. Are you trying to achieve this personal goal, but you really have this really stressful job as well, and you've got a family, and so, we have to work through those things as well. Thank you, Angelia. All right. Well, I will say that might be enough kind of awkward silence, so we certainly don't have to keep everyone on, but I hope you guys did find the information interesting. Certainly check out tendinghabits.com/school to learn more about Habit School. Certainly reach out individually if you've got, just questions, things that you want to, chat with me about. I'm happy to do that as well. But I appreciate the time, and I hope this was helpful. Thanks, everyone.